Bushra, Serekunda and Brikama are among many other places around the country where Muslims converge to commemorate the birth of Islam's holiest prophet. Scholars use the opportunity to remind the faithful about his birth, his sacrifice for mankind and Islam, and how Muslims should emulate his lifestyle to earn Allah's blessing. Abu Bakr Dabo, Grts.
Thousands of people have taken to streets of Basse Upper River region to protest against the European Union's 17-point conditions issued to the Gambia government. Babukar Kamar reports the peaceful demonstrators were demanding an apology from the EU.
They took to the streets, breaking a record of civil protests ever to be registered in the country's political history. They have shown their solidarity with President Jammeh's rejection of the 17 EU point conditions, marching from entrance of Basse town to the residence of their governor.
In response to the European Union's 17 points of Article 8 political dialogue being imposed on the democratically elected government of the Gambia, this is Upper River Region Solidarity March denouncing the European Union's imposed 17 points on the Gambia.
Their solidarity march exhibits their lofty ideals embedded in our national constitution, survived by their will and due consent after 4 years of foreign rule. They have not relented and vowed to stand behind the strong denouncements made by the country's leadership barely 2 weeks ago.
The people of URR wish to denounce and reject all the 17 points of the European Union that tantamounts to external interference in the internal affairs of our independent state.
On behalf of His Excellency the President, I wish to seize this opportunity to thank the organizers of this march and to show, as a show of solidarity to His Excellency the President against these EU 17 points to try to destabilize this country.
They have earlier turned in their thousands, making coordination difficult for organizers of the civil protests against the EU. This has proven beyond the current heights of their willingness to determine how and who should govern them.
We say no to the EU demands. We say no to the EU demands. We say no to the EU demands.
Babukar Kamara, Grts.
Supporters and opponents of President Mohamed Morsi of Egypt engage in fresh clashes a day before the second-year anniversary of the ousting of Hosni Mubarak, and heavy flooding in southern Mozambique forced tens of thousands of people out of their homes. These and other stories when we come back. Welcome back. Protests have erupted once again at Egypt's Tahrir Square, a day before the second-year anniversary of the uprising that toppled Hosni Mubarak. Pro- and anti-Morsi supporters clashes with police on Thursday night, and tens of thousands of people have fled their homes in southern Mozambique following heavy floods that swept the country. We have details of those and other stories in this Africa News Roundup.
Police battled protesters in Tahrir Square on Thursday night, a day before a planned rally to mark the second anniversary of the uprising that toppled Hosni Mubarak. On Friday morning, they were joined by thousands of opposition supporters. A number of checkpoints were set up around the square to verify the identities of people taking part. Another demonstration was held outside the presidential palace. Opponents of Egypt's President Mohamed Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood accused the president of being autocratic and of having betrayed the revolution. Nicolas Tiangaye, the new Prime Minister of the Central African Republic, is in talks with opposition parties over the formation of a national unity government. On Friday morning in Bangui, Mr. Tiangaye said he would no longer wait for the list of nominees from the presidential majority before choosing his cabinet. The new government will be structured in accordance with the agreement reached in Libreville. It will be comprised of 30 ministers drawn from the main political parties, the Rebel Alliance Seleka, and civil society. Tens of thousands of people have fled their homes in southern Mozambique following the heavy floods that swept through the country on Wednesday. Aid agencies are struggling to deliver tents, food, and other supplies to the hardest-hit areas, which lie 230 kilometers north of the capital. Flooding in the south of the country has disrupted the exportation of electricity to South Africa, cutting transmissions by half. Some 15,000 crocodiles have escaped from a farm in South Africa's far north. Heavy rains and flooding of the Limpopo River forced the owner of the farm, a favorite tourist attraction, to open the gates to release water after the storm surge. About half the crocodiles have been recaptured. The rest are thought to have escaped into the bush and the Limpopo. One family rescued from their flooded house said there were crocodiles swimming around them.
North Korea has threatened South Korea with heavy physical countermeasures if Seoul takes part in any UN sanctions against the secretive nation. This latest bickering between the neighboring states come amidst the fallout from the December rocket launch by Pyongyang. CNN's Matthew Chan scourges the reaction of South Korea to this threat.
It's the latest alarming threat from North Korea, this time aimed at its southern neighbour. On the country's evening newscast, the presenter talks of the puppet group of traitors, Pyongyang's term for the government of South Korea. We will take strong physical countermeasures against them, she reads, if they take a direct part in any UN sanctions. It's unclear what her state has in mind, but this increasingly blunt rhetoric is part of the fallout of a December rocket launch by Pyongyang, an international reaction to it. It was condemned by the UN Security Council, which imposed more crippling sanctions earlier this week. And the latest threat comes just a day after this nuclear one, broadcast in defiant tone the night before. Satellites and long-range rockets will be launched one after another, officials in Pyongyang announced, as well as a nuclear test to target the United States in what they called a new phase of their anti-US struggle. North Korea has already conducted 2 nuclear tests in 2006 and 2009. US officials say a third would only deepen the country's isolation. But analysts say that doesn't seem to be of paramount concern to its untested young leader, Kim Jong-un. And there are signs that even China, Pyongyang's economic lifeline, is increasingly frustrated. In an unusual step, China voted for the resolution condemning North Korea last week at the Security Council, where it could have used its veto. And in a rare public rebuke, a state-run communist newspaper in Beijing carried this warning. If North Korea engages in further nuclear tests, China will not hesitate to reduce its assistance to North Korea. It may prove an empty threat, but Pyongyang, so dependent on China, is unlikely to have overlooked Beijing's obvious annoyance. Matthew Chance, CNN Seoul.
Well, we now take our second break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The Gambia might not be represented in the ongoing Africa Cup of Nations, but one person who continues to fly the country's flag in the tournament is central referee Bakary Papagassama. The Gambia's top football referee made his second Africa Cup of Nations appearance, officiating the ill-tempered game between Tunisia and Algeria. This report looks at